Right. So today we are going to do a crypto for dummies about smart contracts. So, what is a smart contract? A smart contract is basically just an address on the Ethereum blockchain. And so an address is just a long string of numbers and letters that are a unique hexadecimal value, and it's unique across the entire blockchain. And so this is how we look up things and provide addresses to things, sort of like a email address or a domain name. It's how computers find your account on the Ethereum blockchain. And so a smart contract, it has its own address. And in this address can contain two things. The first is logic. And so an example of a logic is basically a function that can be called by somebody else. So an example is if you had an ERC20 token smart contract, a logic function that somebody could call would be transfer. So you would call that function to execute logic to move tokens from your account to somebody else's account. And so that's what logic is. The second thing is storage. And so, there might need to be numbers, addresses, things like that stored in the smart contract. And this storage lives across, the lifetime of the smart contract, across transactions. And so this is more like, storing MP3s on your computer or something, right? So you want this data to be around for use later. An example of this is, again, if we think about an ERC20 token smart contract, you would want to store the balances of everybody's addresses in that contract, and you would want that to live across transactions across the time, in the blockchain there. And so that's what all a smart contract is, right? A smart contract, since it has an address, it can hold things like Ethereum. So you can send Ethereum into a smart contract and then it can hold it there. It can send it other places. And, since it has an address, also it can hold things like other assets like ERC20 tokens. And again, logic can be built into the smart contract to send that ETH or those ERC20 tokens outside to somebody else. And another interesting thing is that one smart contract can actually call logic in other smart contracts. And so this is sort of a very powerful thing on Ethereum, is that contracts can interact with each other. And so one smart contract might build in some functionality on top of another one, and they can call each other. And this is why the network effect on Ethereum is pretty strong. So everybody's building these little programs in these smart contracts. They're calling each other, they're building on top of each other, and they're interacting with each other to do more complex things as time goes on. So let's do an example smart contract here. And what we're going to do is a multi-sig wallet smart contract. And so a lot of times what people want to do is they want to have an address on the Ethereum blockchain that holds funds, but they want to require multiple people to sign off on a transaction before it sends funds out of the address. This might be for a company's wallet, right? You don't want one person in the company to be able to send themselves funds. It might be for security reasons. Maybe you have an account on your phone, and then you also have a hardware wallet account, and you want like super strict security, so you don't want any funds to leave that unless both your phone and your hardware wallet both say yes, let's send funds out. So just like the other sort of example here, the multi-sig wallet on Ethereum has its own address. In this case, we're going to do a 2 of 3 multi-sig. So it's going to store 3 owners on the smart contract, and 2 of them have to agree to send funds out of the smart contract. So let's introduce our owners of the smart contract. So we've got 3 handsome fellas here. We got Adam, Kevin, and Fetus, and all 3 of them have their own addresses down here. Now, in Ethereum, if your address is not a smart contract, it is considered an externally owned account. And you'll see that abbreviated as EOA. So that's what that means. So, an example of this might be a Ledger hardware wallet, it might be MetaMask, it might be a Trezor hardware wallet, but any sort of wallet that's not a smart contract on the blockchain. Um, and so uh, these are the addresses that are going to be owners of this multi-sig contract. So, we have some logic in this smart contract. In this case, we're going to keep it very simple. And we're going to say this multi-sig wallet can only do one thing, and that's send ETH. And so this is going to be a logic function that is exposed to the outside world. And it's only going to execute and be successful if two people of these three people agree. So when you think about what's going to be stored inside this contract, it's going to be the three users' address so that when the logic is executed, it can look up and see, did Adam agree? Did Kevin agree? Did Fetus agree to send funds? So let's send one ETH into this smart contract. So let's say I send one ETH into here. It's going to hold one ETH in that smart contract. Now to get it out, these users are going to have to agree to send funds out. So if Kevin says, I want to do this by myself, I'm going to try to send one ETH to myself, and I'm going to try to steal the funds out of the wallet. The logic is going to execute, and it's going to say, have two of the three people in this list agreed? And if not, it's going to reject it. So in this case, Kevin was the only one to try to send funds to himself. Nobody else agreed to do that. So that's going to get rejected and the funds will not leave the wallet. And so the logic there is what actually does like this little program that says, I'm going to execute this logic and see if I should send the funds or not. Now, let's say both Fetus and Adam agree to send funds to James. They both say send one ETH to James. So they would send from their externally owned account a transaction that triggers this logic to the smart contract that says, I want to send one ETH to James, and then the other person sends, I want to send one ETH to James, and the logic in that smart contract is going to say, okay, two people out of the three people agreed to send one ETH to James, and so it's actually going to send that to me, and I'm going to be happy because I have your ETH now. So that's sort of a walkthrough of like a simple smart contract example with a 2 of 3 multi-sig smart contract. Now, just to recap here, so what is a smart contract? All they are addresses on the Ethereum blockchain that can contain logic and storage. And externally owned accounts or other smart contracts can execute the logic on these smart contracts. And when executed, the logic triggers and runs through a little program, and that little program can update storage at its address. It can call other smart contracts, it can send ETH, and it can do a few other things like that. And so that's all a smart contract is a little program that lives at an address on the Ethereum blockchain, can contain logic and storage.